Greetings and welcome to The Hidden Palace, the show where we talk with experts and enthusiasts about video game preservation. My name is Bo. I'm back at the controls for episode 5 of the show, and I've got with me the Hidden Palace media team. We've got Saz.
Hello, everybody.
And we've got Nick.
Hello, good evening.
Welcome back to the show. Thanks to everyone who listened to and commented on our interview with Alexander Urath of Pyramid and Resident Evil 2 fame. Great response. Very in-depth interview. This show will not be about that. It will not be directly about Sonic stuff, but it will be about something we've talked about before, which is the uncharted depths of the demo disc library and where you can find prototype builds of games hiding in plain sight. So we talked a little bit about this in episode 2, and now we're going to talk a lot more about it.
Like I mentioned in the previous episode about this, I was very hesitant to start adding demos to the wiki because they're publicly released things. They're ostensibly just normal discs, normal games that you could just get anywhere. But through your work, it really opened my eyes to just how undiscovered a lot of things are just through demos alone.
Yeah, there's often early builds, and most of the time what you can see on the demo disc is not very exciting. But the thing with the developers at the time, and probably still today, is that you don't want to do a whole lot of work for the demo. You want to turn off some stuff and do a build and ship that out. But if it's just a superficial disabling of a level or a feature, well, it can be superficially undisabled too. And I think that's where the unlock comes in, where it's not just the public thing. It is something more. It is, in some cases, as good as a prototype release that we might find from a magazine preview or something, and in some cases even more than that.
And demos for a lot of people are how some people just played games. Like they didn't get the full games, they just played the demos. So people who wouldn't necessarily be nostalgic for or interested in a particular game prototype might be more interested in exposing more from the demo of that game they may have played.
Yeah, I've even had people ask me, hey, there's a demo of, I don't know, Ace Combat 3 for PlayStation that I played to death as a kid. Can you see if there's more on that? And it's even after the Japanese final game, so there's not going to be anything really undiscovered or new about it, but they're just curious because it's well, that's the one I played, so what if there's more? I have, for my part, focused on the demos that are based on pre-release builds. And since we talked last time, I've done as deep a dive as I can, I think, into the PlayStation demo disc library. And there's a lot of PlayStation demos. And triaging what's there was sort of a process I had to come up with. So timestamps back in the day, not always good. When computers were not hooked up to always-on internet connections, your clock was not necessarily synced to the NTP server. And so sometimes you'll have a disk that says, all of my files are from 2029, or there's 12 European demo disks in a row that are all nominally built on December 12th, 1995 or something.
Yeah, that's a thing with PlayStation in general, is the PlayStation Disc Creator tool that Sony gave to devs. It doesn't actually, it's not really the time that's put on the files on the disk is not real. It's made up by the utility itself. I don't even think it pulls it from the OS, or if it does it in some weird way, or some way that can be overridden. It's not. They're not meant. The files aren't. The dates on the files aren't meant to be real.
Right. Yeah. it looks like somebody has to like go and type in, what do you want these files to be?
Yeah, exactly.
And so sometimes there's metadata elsewhere on the disk, or sometimes games themselves have build dates in them. And I did come up with sort of a triaging process, as I said, of okay, here's the best timestamp I can find for this disk. Here are all the games that are on it. I know when they were released. And so if the demo was built before the release, then it's at least a candidate to go check out. And so that's how I filtered through the hundreds and hundreds of things you could potentially be looking at in the PlayStation library. And it's still quite a lot, but there's really a lot of repeats. So I think they were playing to the crowd. They know everybody wants to play Gran Turismo, and they know everybody wants to play Tony Hawk. So you get a lot of the same builds month to month and then across magazines. But even so, there's still so many PlayStation games.
Yeah, how often do you actually see a particular game have multiple demo builds throughout its like development timeline? It's usually just one that they crank out like through on multiple like demo discs, and they don't really make another. I guess if a game has a very long development time, they might have multiple, but I can't think of one off the top of my head.
Yeah, it's interesting. The Japanese developers, I think, tend to do more builds and push out the latest stuff, whereas the Western developers, it's sort of like this was the demo. Wherever this is going to appear, it's going to be the same one. And like two examples of that, one would be Motor Tune Grand Prix. And so this is like a cartoony kart racing game for PlayStation. And it's notable, I think, because the team later went on to do Gran Turismo. And so this is their sort of learning how car physics work on the PlayStation that led to this really successful path-breaking game. But there's like a very early auto demo of it on one of the Japanese demo discs with not even controls implemented. It's just sort of the camera and the way the carts look. And then in the next demo disc, the next month, there's more. And then there's another one that's after that. So you do get more of those month to month builds on the Japanese side. And then on the other side, on the Western, one that sticks out is Matt Hoffman's Pro BMX. I got to make sure I say the right BMX game.
I believe that's correct.
Yes. So on one of the Tony Hawk games, they shipped a Matt Hoffman BMX demo, and that one's pretty early. It's at least 8 months early. And then that same demo appears month after month in magazines in the US and in Europe, and I think even in Japan, all the way up to the release. And then they finally get another build. So yeah, once you've seen one build, though, at least for me, I can sort of check out the file sizes and the like which files are there and make a pretty good guess that okay, this is the same as one I've already seen.
Have you ever needed to Frankenstein together a demo using other files from another build just to like get some parts of it working?
One that stands out is a Saturn game. There's a Sega did this Flash Sega Saturn series in Japan, and there's a Saturn Bomberman, which is one of the best Saturn games, demo on the Flash Sega Saturn that can almost boot up on its own, but not quite. But if you steal a little bit of code from the final, then it can. So yeah, you got to sort of rig the disk such that you can play the full thing.
That's actually impressive that the code internally is able to just work with. It's like future compatible. It's like forward compatible with the final version, or the final code is backward compatible with the demo version.
Yeah, most of the time you'd run into like linker issues, but this one just needed a little bit of header stuff. That does lead to there is some species of demo disk where actually there is no difference between the release build and the demo build. So, or the only difference is some flag that says I'm in demo mode. So there's a digital pinball game for Saturn that's like that, where the official demo and the release build are 1 byte away from each other, and you get the full set of tables, the full set of everything if you flip that, and then vice versa in the final game. If you flip the same byte, then you're in demo mode.
So I guess they're just kind of like waiting like for their release date to come for that one, and they've already finished it like weeks ahead of time, and they're just trying to build up hype for the release, I guess.
Right.
And let's just like emphasize it. The PlayStation 1 library, it may not be as massive as PlayStation 2. It's still quite a bit of game demos, like just the demos itself. I'm probably imagining there's 100 at least.
So we're talking about like the types of things you find in demos. There's the 1 byte flag that changes. There's the we made one demo and then shipped it out. There's the every month we're going to give you something new. One developer that does the month to month different thing is Codemasters from the UK. And I found one game from them that's kind of interesting. And it's the sort of thing we would see in a Hidden Palace prototype release that would excite people. So they did a game called Micromaniacs Racing. And so this is not like a car racing game the way you would normally think of it, but it's like a toy racing game, and you're sort of in these environments. And this demo build, what you can actually play is just like a track or two. But if you remove the demo limits, you can get access to the menus. And I have found in these PlayStation games, I'm sort of more excited about what the build might hold if I have the menus versus what the levels might be, because usually the menus aren't finished at the time until the game's nearly shipped. And so this Micromaniacs one, it has, once you get into the menus, like some interesting stuff that did get cut from the game. And in particular, there's a cheat code that is in the demo build that got taken out of the final, and it's called Unlock V3 Tracks. And I didn't know what that meant, but Jason at the PlayStationLibrary.com, he knew that V3 Tracks referred to another Codemasters game called Micro Machines V3. And so it's a similar sort of game. It's a racing game where you're these like toy-sized things going through rooms, and household objects are giant compared to your toy size. It looks like they wanted you to be able to play the tracks from the old game in the new game. And then a few weeks before the final, they thought, you know what, never mind, we're not going to bother with that.
I also to add to your point about unfinished menus, I think credits are definitely the one thing I like to see in unfinished builds the most, because they always have some little funny like developer like notes in there for the because they don't have all the names yet of everyone who's worked on it. So it's always funny to see what kind of placeholder credits you have to there. Also, to add to Nick's point about just how many like PlayStation demos there are, I just briefly checked Redump just to look at the database of PlayStation like demos, and just the ones that are categorized as demo, I see 400 of them in the Redump database. There's some dupes in there, but that's also not including Japanese like Taikenban demos, which are a separate edition altogether.
Micromaniacs also mentions it's a foxkids.com game. I've never even heard of like foxkids.com being promoted like too much. It was maybe like, if at anything, like maybe like a couple of mentions throughout the life of like that, and towards like the 2000s before they swapped over the 4Kids. And I'm kind of like astounded at how much people were just wanting their properties to be a video game. Like, I'm sorry, I've just not heard of this Micromaniacs game, despite like, having like the basic channels like Fox. So that would be like my only source of like cartoons and getting to see something different. So just to even like still discover games and just property through video game, it's there's a lot of stuff out there.
That's a great point. The foxkids.com thing, it's kind of funny that they put their name on that, because there's in the demo for this game, if you let it just sit, it'll play the attract mode. And there's a book where your little toy guy goes on. It says play video games to win women. I don't think the foxkids.com brand people really looked at this very thoroughly, but they did not sponsor it in Europe. So
I mean, to be fair, that like tail end, like late 90s, early 2000s of era of Fox Kids, they were just really just throwing anything at the wall. And then 4Kids eventually put their foot in the door. That's a whole side story. So just another one of those things from Fox, I guess.
But the point you made about this being a way to discover games is a good one, because I was not a PlayStation kid growing up. I had a neighbor who had a PlayStation, and I got to play, the big hits, the Final Fantasy VII and the Metal Gear Solid and such. But I was a Saturn guy, and this really is my proper introduction to the PlayStation library. So there's stuff I've certainly played more PlayStation games in the last couple of months than I ever have before. And yeah, I feel like I have a very good handle of what the library is like now that I didn't have before.
And depending on what side of the coin you want to look at, it'll increase for PlayStation 2. It's incredible the amount of just junk in demos that are on that console. There's a little bit of junk like towards the end of PS1's life, but I think they were able to get away from that. PlayStation 2 is once that hit the floor, they were like full steam ahead with marketing type like disc and stuff. So
yeah, that was kind of cool to see the arc of the PlayStation through the demos, because like it's the same hardware from 1995 on, but what they're able to do with it from 95 to 96 and then all the way to 2000, 2001 is very different. Like the graphics get a lot better, even though the hardware stays the same. But things do really start to fall off after 2000. Like you get a lot of repeat demos month to month in the magazine discs, and then you get like, we're just going to play the hits. Like you still want Gran Turismo, you still want Tony Hawk. This is more for the kids who haven't moved on to the next system yet.
And not just for like the kids that are like moving on to the next Sony system, they're still trying to get, at the time at least, the Sega and Nintendo Pi. To be honest, though, like if I'm trying to think of like Nintendo demos,
well, Nintendo liked to really control the ecosystem. So, and the fact that they were stuck with cartridges until the GameCube made it pretty difficult to, release demos. So Nintendo basically just published videos and media. So they had a much lower chance of like exposure, I guess, of unfinished content. In GameCube, I think you might be right. Like, I don't remember any GameCube demo discs.
Well, they had those special discs, right? So it's not a commodity.
I mean, they're all pieces of plastic at the end of the day.
Yeah.
It's easier to put a CD into a cereal box than it is a cartridge, for example.
Yes.
One other thing I think has been sort of interesting with these demos is sometimes you'll connect a prototype that was already released to a demo build that was nominally already out there, but people didn't realize. So, for example, there's this Pitfall 3D game for PlayStation where if you go on Hidden Palace, you can find a build that had a proper release and everything. But hidden on one of the PlayStation Magazine demos is the exact same build. They like to hide these things where if you put in some button code, you can play a different game or watch a different video. And this Pitfall one's on one of them. I was looking to see, like, is there anything actually different between the two? And they're not like byte for byte identical, but functionally, I think it's the same thing. Like maybe they were compiled on different days or something, but or on different machines, but it's clearly what it was meant for. The Jam Pack Volume 1 PlayStation demo. That disc in particular, I don't know why it was so rich with pre-release stuff. So it's got Herc's Adventures, which is a game associated with the LucasArts of Star Wars fame and such. Kind of a weird little adventure game.
Well, LucasArts is pretty famous for their weird little adventure games as well.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's an early build by almost a month, and it doesn't have like a lot of like extra stuff that you can't see beyond the demo. But I did find that they forgot to disable the cheat that activates the credits. And then so you can crash the demo if you put that in because the files for that are not there.
I'd imagine the the QA process from like Sony and the actual like publishers for the demos was a lot more lenient than the final build. So I'd imagine a lot of those issues kind of snuck in.
Right. And well, we talked with HWD last time about cheat codes making their way onto demos and like giving you access to the entire game, which is one of my favorite things to find. But just on this jam pack, so Herc's Adventures was early. Machine Hunter from Core Design, also early. Different title screen, different credits. Codename Tinka, early. There's The Lost World Jurassic Park. That's a couple months early. It's got debug stuff that isn't in the final. MDK and Thunder Truck Rally, also early. Some of these I was discovering for the first time. It was also interesting to me how different the demo experience from Japan to the US to Europe was. So, of course, in Japan, you get just a ton of games that nobody's ever heard of because they didn't ever get localized. But in Europe, you also get some games that came out just in Japan and Europe, or some games that were Europe exclusive. There's a lot of soccer games that didn't come out in the US. And I don't think I would have ever heard of those had I not been doing this deep dive.
Yeah, the Europe loves their soccer. Their what's the one that's kind of like baseball but not?
That's cricket, right? They have
that is
billiards
cricket
games too. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, yes. They love their table games as well. Yeah.
It feels like there was like a few like platformers that were kind of also like EU exclusive, wasn't there? Or just because I wouldn't assume it was just all sports.
There's some like European like comic characters that have like no relevance in the West.
Okay, that's it.
That's
like it.
Belgian character, like Belgian comics. I think the Smurfs probably have a small handful of European exclusive platformers.
Asterisks,
Obelisk and Asterisk. Yeah. Yes, yeah. That's one of them. We released one on our Project Deluge, I think it was, or maybe it was one of our other big releases where we had like one of those European like comic strip games, and it was all in indecipherable language for a English speaker like me. But it had some funny unfinished art in there. But yeah, that's pretty common for those European like comics to have their own like EU exclusive games, and even in those cases, those are still exclusive to specific EU countries. Like we tend to like coalesce EU releases as just the continent, but some games just only get released in certain countries in Europe.
I did learn through this demo disc expedition that Germany often had different variants because they're a little more squeamish about violence in games. So maybe you would have a demo disc that had a Mortal Kombat game on it in the rest of the EU, but Germany said no.
Very common at the time.
Yeah,
Yep.
I mean, it's common today as well. Like those,
They
Right.
still haven't let up.
yeah, those laws are still the same. That's why in Germany, one of like the more popular games are like simulator games, like Euro Truck Simulator and stuff like that, because those are the kind of games people in Germany play because they don't have really like as many action packed video games.
Earlier in the year, Hidden Palace did this release of the zombie game.
Oh, Dead Rising, yes.
Yes, and when I was looking into that to educate myself about this game, I did find it was just outright banned in Germany. Cannot get this game in Germany.
Yeah, which is actually kind of funny because zombies are usually used as a substitute for people in
Right.
in certain localizations just to get around censorship laws. But Dead Rising was a little bit too violent for them. I mean, it's a pretty violent game, so I can see why they would do that.
There's a website called Demo Pals, and we can link to it in the show notes. But some commendable person went through every European demo disc and made a listing for each one and what's on it and what magazine it came out on. And they have all the regional variants. And what a great resource they prevented me from having to do the same thing. And thankfully, there's also some person who, I don't have their name in front of me, they made a spreadsheet with every Japanese demo disc. Same commendations go out to them. And then Jason of PlayStation Library has it for the US releases. So that did really speed up the process of looking through everything.
And I imagine Redump is also a pretty good resource for like getting like full like library like lists of demos from all sorts of regions and just knowing if they even have been dumped, because there are still some games that have not been dumped. Like we don't have them online to access. Mostly, Asia region specific demos, but there are some still out there. So if you ever see a demo disc on eBay, check Redump to see if it's been dumped, and if not, you can make your first contribution. Yeah.
There is a Saturn one that I was trying to chase down forever because somehow nobody had captured it before. And I think it's Gun Griffin, the mech fighting game. When I finally got a hold of it, I found belatedly that it was on archival.org just as a standalone thing, not part of any collection. And so my efforts to acquire it were for naught. But and also it was more for naught because there was like nothing interesting with it. It is like pre-final, but beyond what you can see, there's nothing there. So there's a lot of strikeouts in the data mining process.
Yeah, I mean, if I had a nickel for every time I bought a game on like Yahoo Auctions or eBay, just because it was marked as like missing on Redump, like they didn't have like the hash for it, and then when I get it, it's exactly the same as one that's already been released. I'd have, I don't know, I'd have maybe like a couple dollars, but I mean, it's weird that it's happened so many times.
Yeah. Well, I think that also does sort of make the process of doing the discovery a little bit more addicting, because a lot of times you get nothing, but then sometimes it's something really cool.
It's real life gotcha.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So speaking of ones that were kind of cool, there's a racing game called Test Drive 5 from Accolade. And there's a bunch of games in the Test Drive series that aren't necessarily related to each other, but 4 and 5 are kind of in the same vein. But this is an early build. I think it's from a couple months prior to the final. And it does have some things I enjoy, where you're supposed to only be able to play on one track, but the auto demo attract mode has 2 more. And so, okay, well, they're on the disc, so if you hook them up, then you could play them. So that's fun. But what was really cool was getting the menus, because in this build, there is a secret there's a secret menu for the developers, and the title of it is not debug menu or anything. It's OARS. So they're British, obviously, the people who made this game. And when you load up the OARS menu, you get a list of 16 functions that you can turn on and off, and then they affect the rendering of the cars in the game. So you can change the shadow and change whether the car renders at all, and stuff about the environment. And this functionality just isn't in the final game at all, so it's like just there for them to be experimenting with while they're making the game. But this one I did send to the developer who I thought put it in, and he wrote back and said, "Yep, that sounds like me. That is something I would do." And then he told me also that there's a car in the game that's the name of it when you're playing is CK's Beast. And he said, "That's actually my car. I'm Chris Kirby, CK, and it's my Volkswagen Golf that we modeled the car off of." So funny to find the OARS menu, funny to make a connection with the developer who put it in there, and then you get a little bit of backstory about the game too.
These tend to be really good openers for reaching out to devs, aren't they?
Yeah, I do like finding stuff and then finding who put it in there, and especially if it's like an Easter egg, like there's like alternative credits in a 3DO game called Phoenix 3, where it's just like the developers joking around. And I sent that one to the developer who put it in there, and then he gave me like a nice little blurb about how the game was made and like the frustrations he had with the bosses and stuff. I think we mentioned on a previous one, it's like, wouldn't it be cool if people were interested in the work you do, like in your 9 to 5, 30 years later?
Yeah, like I couldn't even remember. Like I couldn't even give you answers on that. That's how traumatizing it must be for them that they're able to remember so many years later.
Right. Well, when we were talking to Alexander in the last episode, like he had this photographic recall for this 8-month crunch time he had on Resident Evil 2.
Yeah, that's something that'll probably just never, like there are just some formative memories that just never leave your head. And I guess that just might be one of them.
We were talking about the like regional differences, and I think this happened less and less over time, and as the media environments became more aware of each other. But in the 90s, it was sometimes the case that a game got released in Japan and then it got like a makeover for the US, like different characters or different story or something. The classic example being Mario 2, right?
My favorite is Decap Attack.
Oh, I don't know if I know Decap Attack.
It's a Sega Genesis game. In Japan, it's just kind of like a cutesy, like fairy, like magician type game. You have like a magic hat. And in America, it's a guy wrapped up like mummy type of thing who has a skull that he throws around, and they completely changed it all to be like kind of like more westernized and like western like funny like cutesy horror type of thing. It's a very different game, but still the same like DNA as the Japanese version.
Huh. Yeah, I'll have to check that out. I guess I get the name with the Decap Attack.
It's a fun. You should like people should play. It's a fun game.
The one that comes to mind for me that I just looked at is there's a fighting game called Versus, which really poor naming, I think, on the part of THQ because it's impossible to search for stuff about this game because it's just VS. But this one is one of those that was totally different in Japan. Like it's the same characters once you're into the game, but the menu and the surrounding story and everything else is altered for the Western releases. And even some of the gameplay mechanics aren't there. Like there's this special meter that they added for the US release. But the demo version of it that appeared prior to the US release is sort of a halfway, well, more than halfway. It's more US than the Japanese version, but like it's missing some of the stuff that they added to make it the versus game versus what it was originally called. In Japan, it was called Fighter's Impact. So this is like a transitional fossil between Fighter's Impact and versus.
I assume they had settled on the name by then of Versus.
Yeah, it's got the right look. This one was also mildly interesting in the menus because there's a like a big part of the advertising for this game versus was the soundtrack is supposed to be cool. So it sort of appeals to me as a 90s kid. It's got the Suicide Machines and it's got Los Infernos and but in the demo they have another track listed that didn't make the final game, and they actually even apologize on the title screen of the demo. It says, due to the size constraints of this demo, the exciting alternative music in this game cannot be included. If you lift the restrictions, you can get into the options screen and get the sound select, and there's a song that is in the list that isn't there on the final version's music test, and I had to track it down. It's like this obscure band called Pigs in Space, and the only reference to it is a YouTube video from the band that talks about how it was going to be in verses. So, Pigs in Space fans, if you're listening, this could have been for that band.
I mean, unironically, yeah, you're right. Like, if they would have kept that track in, they could have gotten like a few sales. It's just those little things that add up for for many people, and just like with the demos, they were just throwing them out there because they needed many eyes on it as possible. They needed everyone coming in to buy their product. As this is why you would find multiple demos for or a demo for the same game in like multiple magazines. It's pretty it gets pretty polluted, especially when you get to like that 99 2000s like year with EGM, GamePro, official PlayStation magazine, etc.
And we haven't even gotten into like Xbox demos as well. There's definitely a lot of big demo discs on OG Xbox.
Yeah, I need to get my next set ready to go. I still have a ton of stuff to publish for PlayStation. If I haven't said it explicitly, I've been publishing patches that unlock the stuff that you can't see in the normal demo one by one. So last week I published a couple of patches for there's a RPG for PlayStation called Tales of Destiny, and Namco put out a couple of previews in Japan for this months apart from each other, and what they thankfully did for me was they left in the quote unquote debug room, and this is just like a test area where you can do like pretty much everything, like access every type of menu and launch any one of the maps or go into the different types of battles. And so, of course, the normal demo just lets you play the intro and the first couple of maps. But if you can get into this room, you can go anywhere. And there's a bunch of stuff on the disc that you can't normally access in the demo. And then there's even more in the next build a few months later. And I love it when that happens, where you get access to something that makes it easy to explore everything. Because sometimes it's like, if you want to experience the levels that aren't part of the demo, you got to fight your way through the entire game. But with this one, you can just warp right there. And then, thankfully for that, for this, they did the same thing on the next game in the series, which I think is called Tales of Fantasia, and then they did it again on Tales of Destiny 2. So I'll have patches for all of those out within the next week or two.
I assume you're going to put those in the show notes when they're ready.
Yeah.
Keep an eye out for that.
And so those are examples of games where you get sort of multiple builds and you can see the progress from month to month. And sometimes we talked about, like with Sonic 2, where we'll get multiple builds in a week or even a day, and we can see at a very micro level what was changing in the development of the game. And if you add in like a game that has multiple prototypes released already, some of these demos, you can get the same thing with other games. And there's like a cool kids floaty skateboarding game called Cyberdeck for PlayStation that I'd never heard of, but I kind of enjoyed messing with. And it's got an early build on Hidden Palace, and then you've got this demo that's close in time to it, but not exactly at the same time. And you can see it morphing from some unknown previous state to the final. Like they change how the overworld works, and they change how the characters access the levels, and they change the items. And you can tell from prototype 1 to demo to prototype 2, like how far along that stuff is. And, you know, if there's a Cyberdeck Discord that I can get an invite to, that would be great. We can discuss this.
I wonder if there are any demos that grossly misrepresent what type of game the final game would actually be. I mean, the one that comes to mind in most recent history is Brutal Legend, which the demo was just a pretty, standard like 3D platformer. And then when the game actually came out, it turns out that was like a very small part of the game. It was actually like not an RTS, but like a kind of like an RTS type of game. Very, very different. So I wonder if that ever happened back in the PlayStation days.
I'm trying to think. There's more games than you would think in the Saturn library that are combination racing games / dating sims, and I think there's maybe one demo disc where you get just the racing, and you're like, oh man, this could have been the whole thing. I don't need the dating sim.
And I'm sure there's people that want the opposite.
The other way.
Yeah.
And on top of the to add on to the differences in versions, it's kind of a daunting thing to think about, but with all of these sports titles and stuff, what is the chance of there just being just an accidental like roster change in between? I think now it's kind of like a little bit more like normalized, and they tend to stick to the year that's written down for everyone. But now I'm just kind of second guessing what's out there just because of all of the research that you've put out over these past couple of months. I'd never thought that it's just like you said, everything's just out in plain view. It's not even hiding. It's right there for people to see. It's just, if this is like the case, like there's going to be demos for all sorts of consoles to start looking through now for any differences. Like this is a big undertaking you've put onto yourself. Like this is huge.
Yeah, the only place that kind of really looked at demos before was probably like TCRF. You'll occasionally get some pages on the cutting room floor for demos and they'll mark those as like proto sometimes. If they're like some obviously significant differences that you could just kind of tell like right from the get-go. But nobody, as far as I'm aware, really is doing deep dives into demos that superficially look the same, but have things under the hood that are just waiting to be discovered.
There are some games where some talented individual or group has done a deep comparison between the final and what's on the demo, and you tend to see that on the like big important games like your Resident Evil or your Metal Gear Solid or whatever. But yeah, sometimes like there's a Cyberdeck or something that maybe somebody grew up playing, but there's not a big community of people who are super into it that has something interesting. But then on the other hand, there are games that did have a big following and just the tools weren't available or it wasn't obvious how to do it. Like there's some Croc demos where you can access extra stuff, and you can see they're messing around with the visuals of the levels, build to build. Toy Story 2 on PlayStation has some stuff like that, where the demos have a little bit of different stuff, like not huge, but if you're an aficionado, you can spot some stuff.
It was definitely more of an undertaking for like the super fan types for like specific games if they wanted to do a deep dive into these demo discs, like prior to 2026, I've not heard of such projects like happening for like demos.
Right. Yeah, you get it for a specific fan community maybe, but not as a library-wide thing. There are just, outside of demo discs, even games with much bigger followings than I would have guessed based on what I knew, like growing up playing adjacent games. But like a licensed Disney title will have pages and pages of stuff on the cutting room floor or fan sites or wikis and stuff, where like it may not be much as a game, but probably somebody had it as a kid and they remember it fondly and want to go through it.
Yeah, for sure.
Like Chicken Run, for example, like not a game I would have thought anybody would say is their favorite, but no, apparently I'm wrong. There's
that's
a ton
the
of people who like Chicken Run.
Is that is the claymation movie, right?
Right. Yes.
The Wallace and Gromit studio, I believe.
Yeah.
And Aardman, I think, right? Yeah.
And to the audience, like if there are any demos that you played when you were younger and are interested in seeing like what you may have missed on the demos, let us know. Like this is an ongoing project, so we're interested to hear what people want to see.
All right, so yeah, that's the call out to the audience. Tell us what demo discs are interesting, really any system. And tell us also what you want to hear out of this podcast. Hopefully we'll do some more developer interviews. We'll do some more Hidden Palace greatest hits. We'll do some more Sonic stuff. And we hope you'll listen and tell people to listen to it. You know what to do with podcasts. Do that.